record on the cloud. Okay, we are recording, and so thank you again, Marco, for joining us, and welcome everybody to this session of the Italian 8 under 13 seminar on entangled emergencies. Now, we have this fantastic privilege of having fantastic guests with us, and in fact today we have Marco Armiero, we had Molly Westling to open the conversation. And the conversation continues. Welcome, Roberta Biasillo from Florence. So every time that I start introducing my guests, I normally take notes and I sort of prepare something, but then everything just escapes from my hands, from my eyes, and I start improvising. I don't think this would be an exception today. Also because there are so many things that you can find on Marco. There are videos online, a lot of pieces of information, his books, his articles, his interventions. So I think that everybody knows Marco a little bit, but I'm gonna give you my personal experience with Marco. So Marco is, for me, a great friend, but an inspiring voice that has been a sort of, ventriloquist in what I write for many years, because even though, so we are in different fields, so he's an historian, I'm a literary person, a philosophy literary person, I'm still trying to define myself, but I've always felt that Marco was saying the things I was trying to say with better words. So I've used his works a lot, and I still do so. And every time that Marco publishes something, I'm very happy, because it saves me some some work. So it's fantastic. So Marco, for those who want the official definition, is the director of the KTH, so the Environmental Humanities Lab at the Royal Institute for Technology in Stockholm. And he is one of the inventors, just like Molly, just like Scott Slovic that will be here, like Johnny Adamson, of the environmental humanities. But he does so from history, from environmental history. So this is yet again another testimony to the fact that the environmental humanities are a choral enterprise. And Marco has written important books. So we were mentioning A Rugged Nation, translated into Italian as the Le Montagne della Patria, which, by the way, received important prizes and recognition. Is also the editor with Marcus Hall of Nature and History in Modern Italy. I'm doing this by heart, so Marco, please feel free to correct me. Which came out from Ohio University Press in 2010. Is the author of a book about about the story of environmentalism with Lisa Cedres, of a history of environmental migrations. And one of my favorite volumes he recently edited is the volume Future Remains with Greg Mittman and Rob Emmett, which is the result of another very original enterprise that Marco created, the Anthropocene Cabinet of Curiosities. So Marco has invented many things. I think you should patent all these things that you invent. He has invented the Anthropocene Cabinet of Curiosity, the Anthropocene Slam, the conferences in Stockholm with strange titles, Streams, crosscuts about the environmental movie film festival. But every time that Marco writes something, this something becomes an intervention. And for example, at the Anthropocene Cabinet of Curiosity, he had this very idea that we should occupy the Anthropocene. And so at least we should, as scholars, mutiny, like in the Bounty, and occupy the Anthropocene. At least before someone sends armed guards at the gates of our academic debates. Isn't it true, Marco? So let's occupy the Anthropocene and uh, let's rebuild the categories of the discourse, which must be political categories. And this is what Marco has taught us. And I think that we are learning this lesson in a very effective way, because Marco's voice is also very pleasant to listen to, and his stories are also very important. So welcome, Marco, and let's have fun. Let's occupy this seminar, right? Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, this is a problem, right? When a very good friend of yours invites you to do something, you should not accept. Because the point is that this person will make such a fantastic introduction that whatever I am now going to perform, you will say, well, still, it's not like Serenella said. So this is the problem. The best is to invite it by somebody that actually don't like you so much. And so, it will make more or less, okay presentation, and then you can really, shy how good you are. So anyway, thank you very much, Serenella. And I will try not to speak for more than 20 minutes. So I have here my clock. So first of all, I want to thank Serenella for inviting me here today. And of course, I want to thank all of you for listening to me. I have been doing this job for many years, and I must say that I'm still surprised to learn how many people are actually interested in what I have to say. And it's always, great and important. Apparently also my dog wants to know what I, so to my talk today, well, you have read the readings, the few texts that I sent to you through Serenella. So my talk today is going to be about the Waste-to-Scene, the age of waste, its toxic narratives, and the multiple practices which aim to sabotage the Waste-to-Scene. However, I cannot escape, and I don't want to escape from COVID-19, which I have argued, and I will argue today, I think is a perfect metaphor. I would say a perfect epiphany more than a metaphor, actually, a perfect manifestation of the Waste-to-Scene. Well, you have read my piece, my kind of autobiographic piece, I guess, right, on the COVID, and so you know more or less everything about my experience. Let's go a little bit earlier, rather, because in the text I think that I was starting when I got sick. Well, I distinctly remember actually reading about this terrible aggressive virus spreading in some province in China, and we were commenting, me and my family, we were commenting about the fact that this virus, this news would not make to the front page of our newspapers unless the West was actually touched. Because why? Because places outside the global north can serve as a space of war, of misery, of extreme weather events and disease. But these spaces they are not our spaces. At the very core of any colonial project lies the production of the other. And these other can be the people, the places, but whatever they are they must be radically other from a reassuring we, a reassuring and racialized we. I must acknowledge that over that dinner where I was talking with my family, we would never guess that just a few months later, the fallacy of the othering project would actually materialize so harshly in our lives. COVID-19 entered in my body and in our lives, very powerful, and almost killed me. I was hospitalized for almost a month, passing through the traumatic experience of 10 days in the ICU. And, just to be very clear, my chances to survive were not so high. Let's put in this way. I am starting my talk today from this personal experience of COVID, partially because I think that COVID is an epiphany of the Waste-to-Scene. But I must also confess that I'm starting from COVID because, to tell you the truth, in this moment of my life, it's quite difficult to think of anything else but COVID. No, it's pretty important, pretty crucial in my life as well as in my body. Luckily enough, as a scholar, I have always been pretty comfortable with mixing the personal and the academic, if you wish, or as feminists would say, the personal and the political, right? So in this way, I don't feel really weird or odd to share with you my personal experience or to share in a written text my personal experience, because the personal is indeed academic and political. But as I said, I decided to start from COVID-19 also because I do believe that is a perfect epiphany of what I've called the Wastocene. And let me spell it out at the beginning immediately so we don't have any misunderstanding here. When I speak of the Wastocene, it's not a fancy social science jargon to mean the fact that, oh my God, our city is so trashed, there is too much waste around. The Wastocene is not that. When I speak of the Wastocene, I speak not so much about the material stuff of waste per se, but I mostly speak of the wasting relationships which produce wasted people and wasted places. COVID-19 in this sense is a manifestation of the Wastocene. Most likely it arises from the erosion of available space for wildlife, so the wasting of ecosystems, and also it developed following the lines of class, race, gender, and so the wasting of people. Several scholars have argued that ethnic minorities, working class people, urban poor have paid a very high price to the pandemic. And of course, for slum dwellers, but even just for working class people, the appeals to stay at home and wash their hands look like either an insult or a joke. In the United States, for instance, scholars have started to work on the correlation between the spread of the pandemic and ethnic minorities, recording higher rates of morbidity and death among African Americans, Latinx, and Native Americans. Indeed, the virus got me in an extremely acute form. Uh, and in a sense, we can say that the epidemic is like a fracture in the Wastocene line, the Wastocene line which divides those who are disposable from a reassuring we, a reassuring us. Nonetheless, the Wastocene logic will immediately repair the fracture into the wall, restoring the othering divide. This is, I think, is crucial because many times we think that the techno fixes, the ways of providing solutions are actually a way to solve the problems. While I would argue that many times those dispositives, those tools are actually tools implemented to just repair the fracture in the wall, to establish once again the divide between those who are disposable and those who are not disposable. I was lucky enough to live on the right side of the Westocene line, so I could have excellent medical care in Sweden. I am a university professor. I was able to actually get even the support of an ambassador who called the hospital to be sure that I was in a good shape. And by the way, I continued having my salary every month, right? So basically, I was a privileged. What I'm trying to say is that even if the epidemic, the COVID-19, really made the point that we can say that everybody is more or less affected by the pandemic, right? You can still see the social differences that is going on even in this situation. I know very well that COVID-19 is terrible. I lived through it. However, I also realized that for someone, it is more terrible than it might be for an Italian professor working in Sweden. So the COVID-19 demonstrates that the Wastocene enters into the organosphere, that is in the living texture of the planet. One can say that while the Anthropocene, and I am assuming that you know the Anthropocene concept very well at this point, while the Anthropocene is searched for in the geosphere, the Wastocene needs a different kind of archaeology, an archaeology which digs into the living bodies where the wasting relationships have left their indelible marks. Employing the Westocene as our lens, we are better equipped to see how capitalistic violence is inscribed into the human and more than human bodies. But I believe that there are two kinds of toxicity, of toxic embodiment. No, there is a very material toxic embodiment, the one that I could describe as the deepening of capitalist relations within the fabric of life, in the bodies and the environment, producing toxic ecologies at the service of private profits. Something that Benjeri has called necrocapitalism. No? On the other hand, we have the generation and maintenance of toxic narratives. Now, what are toxic narratives? Toxic narratives, and I am, how can I say, recycling, maybe I should say, adapting a concept developed by Wu Ming, no? So basically, Wu Ming said that, wrote that toxic narratives are narratives that are repeated always in the same way, omitting some particulars and, aiming to some kind of narrative result. For me, toxic narratives are narratives which silence injustice, impose official truth, and erase any possible alternative. In order to tackle this double toxicity, we have developed this thing that we have called guerrilla narrative. Now, I want to be very clear with you because, in the end, we are among friends, right? You will not be too harsh in judging me. And I must say that when I started to think and talk about guerrilla narrative, well, basically, I didn't have a very specific, idea of what guerrilla narrative was or should be. Many people are asking me, okay, can you give me, the precise methodology of guerrilla narrative? In a way, I mean, now I can say something more, but the truth is that when we talked about guerrilla narrative, we want just to make a political point. We wanted to say, to flag that our was a militant research agenda. And I mean, there is a joke. I don't know. There is a joke in Serenella and I. We are both. We both come from the same area in Italy, Naples. And as you may know, Naples. I mean, somebody has also mentioned Gomorrah, the book by Saviano, right? So you probably know pretty well the issue of the land of fires, the toxicity in the land. So there is a joke going on now that in the land of fires, in this region, in this area between Naples and Caserta, heavily contaminated by toxicity, toxic contamination, there is a joke that say that every family is composed by the father, the mother, two children, and one sociologist. So, it's basically, so our idea when we were talking about guerrilla narrative was also a way to tell those people, the people that we wanted to involve in a co-production, meaningful co-production of knowledge, that we were not the usual sociologists sitting at their table. We were actually not doing something different. So with guerrilla narrative was a gesture, and this gesture wanted to make explicit the aims of the guerrilla narrative. So the idea of sabotaging the mainstream toxic narrative, which justifies or invisibilize injustice, and occupying this toxic narrative with counter-hegemonic storytelling. Of course, I mean, if I should be a little bit more professional, because I can even pretend to be more professional, I can say that guerrilla narrative is rooted in the scholarly tradition of co-research and action research. It rejects the binary opposition between the expert and the person, the object of the study. And of course, you can see the feminist also methodology inscribed in it. And also, of course, there is a strong relationship between guerrilla narrative and oral history. Maybe one difference here between guerrilla narrative and oral history is that oral history has a clearer antagonist agenda and a conscious and more extensive use of a plurality of narrative tools, including audiovisual, diaries, creative writings, but we have even a song, poems, and other kind of things in our archive. Now, I want just to check my time here. Yes, I have some time. In the factory or in the mine, in the slum or in the working class neighborhood, the subaltern body merges with an ecology that is never just a natural fact. And for me, this is important. And I want also to, how can I say, to steer a little bit of discussion here. I think that, for instance, here there is something new, at least in respect of many, things going on in the environmental humanities nowadays. I think that sometimes when we thought, when we think about, uh, the general merging and blending of humans and non-humans agencies, sometimes we run the risk of losing the fact that all this is not neutral. There are power hierarchies, power relationships organizing this exchange. I think that capitalism is an ecology of exploitation and contamination, which trespasses the human and more than human body. But this trespassing is not random. The assumption of our project, of the guerrilla narrative project, is that it largely interlaces with the faulty line of race, class, and gender. An allergic body in the US, for instance, and I am using here the inspiring book published by Greg Mitman some years ago, Breathing Space. So the allergic body in the US is indeed produced in the meeting between the internal ecology of the body and the external ecology of animal, insect, and artificial allergens. But this is only a portion of the story, because the story should also include, and I'm quoting here from Greg Mitman, the unequal distribution of wealth and healthcare in the American society, end quote. Thereby, what is in an allergic body is the entire arrangement of a racist, classist, and unjust society, as it is crystallized in the external ecology of which that body is part of. So, and we have something very similar in Stacy Alaimo, no? When Stacy Alaimo speaks of the proletarian lung. No, I remember once, I don't know if I should tell this story. Yes, maybe. So I was in a meeting in Munich. I think that Serenella, you were actually there. I was in a workshop in Munich and I was presenting toxic bios and guerrilla narrative. And somebody, she made a comment and she said to me that my understanding of purity and toxicity was very primitive. And actually nowadays things are very mixed up, are very blended, and everything is pure and impure, contaminated and not contaminated. I mean, I think that it was a good point. I see the point. I agree. However, I replied to that person if she was ready to do a swap, an exchange for 1 year, and she could move with her family to a favela that I'm working on, is Moro da Babilonia in Rio, and maybe the family could move to her place, her flat in Munich. And then when her children will get diarrhea every day from the tap water, she might have a very primitive understanding of contamination and purity like mine. So it's true that I'm not very sophisticated in this. It's true. I do believe that the rich are getting better water than the poor. And I do appreciate the fact that our body is a blend, a mix. And I am sure that if I analyze my ear now, I will find something not so pure in my ear, but still I survived to COVID-19. I got in a good hospital and I get my paycheck every month. So I wonder which kind of work is doing this discourse about everything is pure, everything is contaminated. What would be of the years and years of environmental justice struggle if Cancer Alley is just, the same as living in an upper class district in New York City? What we will do with with this? Anyway, for the Toxic Bios project, I know that somebody has been asking me about this. One question was, how did we do actually the project, right? So Toxic Bios was a public environmental humanities digital project. We have built upon the work already done in Europe on environmental justice. We were building upon our networks with activists working in the field of environmental justice. We have been inspired very much by another digital project, which is the Environmental Justice Atlas, EJ Atlas, produced by the Barcelona team around Jean Martinez Salier. If you don't know him, I would suggest you to take a look at this fantastic book, The Environmentalism of the Poor, which has also been translated in Italian by me as Ecologia dei Poveri, Ecology of the Poor. Anyway, so we were building upon this kind of work. We built some hybrid collectives in several countries in Europe. Why hybrid collectives? Because those collectives were collective of researchers, academic researchers and other kind of researchers, people not working in academia. And we have collected so far more or less 70 stories, which are available, not all of them, some of them. We are still uploading the stories on a website, which is toxicbios.eu. Uh, what I can tell about the project, just to try to, yes, my 20 minutes are over. So what I can say about the project is that
Yes, Marco, just go on until you finish
yeah,
your subject.
yeah, I will try to wrap up. So what we have done, well, first of all, I can tell you some problems we got with toxic bios, because somebody was asking about this. So for instance, one big problem was something that we have called the Wikipedia syndrome. So our idea was to collect toxic autobiographies. Our idea was that the body was actually the repository of a toxic story, which was at the same time a rebellion against the Westocene. And unfortunately, many people we contact actually, they were telling us, the story of the conflict, like a Wikipedia. So, in this town, there is a factory, the factory was built in whatever, there is a movement, and we have done this and this, which is not what we were looking for. And I think that the problem is that the Westocene is always producing wasted people, wasted places, and wasted stories. The people, they thought that their stories were not relevant. Their stories were disposable. It was unthinkable for them to think that we were actually interested not in a Wikipedia version of an environmental conflict, but actually in the way in which they have lived their lives through the Westocene. The other problem we also got a little bit was, well, not a problem actually. We thought that those were mainly human stories. No, we were thinking, sure. I mean, I think and I were pretty much an anthropocentric kind of researcher. It was mostly a human centered project. And in the end, we realized that those stories are always entangled with wider ecologies. This is very clear in the website. We have Antonio, for instance, from Portugal, is explaining the contamination of the town where he lives. He's talking with the factory on the background. And while he's saying that the factory is contaminating everything, he does this movement. The factory is contaminating everything. No, it's like putting something in his body with his hands. And he's talking with the river on the background too. And he's talking about himself, the fish, the father going fishing there. So we realize, and this is the same with the other, this is just an example. So we realized that we were wrong. Those were not only human stories. The other thing I can say is that, well, maybe I can, the other thing that I would like to say is that the toxic autobiographies were stories of contamination, right? But in a way, we also thought that in those stories there were also the seeds of resistance. That in the very experience of contamination, those stories were also aiming towards something different, an alternative. If you wish, there was a performative politics going on. And I mean, I want to close my short, talk with you, precisely talking about how much the toxic autobiographies are also liberating autobiographies. If you think about the COVID-19, I have started with COVID-19. COVID-19 is also then it's really uh, proves, it really proves how much Thatcher's vision of society was wrong. You know, Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister, UK Prime Minister, one of the creator of neoliberal, agenda. One of the most important things that she was saying, she said, was that there is no society, there is no such a thing as society, only individuals and families. Well, it's not true. In the COVID-19, something that is very clear is that societies, communities, that society, communities are back. And actually, they have been supporting each other. No? So I am thinking about the People Solidarity Brigades, which have been created with the aim to offer concrete help to those who are struggling, especially economically in the pandemics. But also, together with pasta and canned tomatoes, people in the boxes from the Solidarity Brigades, people have also found books, flyers about the care income campaigns, or questionnaires about their needs. So this is an important thing. This is actually a very important act of resistance. The toxic narratives blamed individuals for being poor, subaltern, sick. And here you see that actually people are organizing with the counter-hegemonic narrative, which is building a prefigurative politics, another kind of community, a community in which solidarity, sharing, commoning is the key. And I have a lot of other examples that maybe I don't need to mention here. But let me close with one concept that as the Wastocene manifests itself through the imposition of toxic narratives and the erasure of stories of resistance, so the struggle against the Wastocene passes also through the construction of alternative archives. And those archives are archives filled with stories which tell loud and clear that to dismantle the Wastocene, it is not enough to clean up a toxic area. To fight back against the Wastocene, the activists have to recover the stories of the workers intoxicated by capitalistic organization of labor and the struggles occurring within and outside the factory. They need to build new relationships among them and with the environment, as it occurred in the city with the solidarity brigades and in many other places. So the contrary, if I can say in this way, the contrary of the waste is generally recycling, no? And it's very important to recycle. And when I say this, many times people, they misunderstand me. It's like I am saying that I'm against recycling, and I'm not. I do recycle, and I think that recycling is very important. However, I do believe that recycling is not the answer, the solution to the Wastocene, because it's a reification of the problem. It's like saying that the problem with the climate change is CO2 in the atmosphere. The problem with climate change is not CO2 in the atmosphere, it's the production, is why we are producing CO2 in the atmosphere. The wasting, the problem is how can we change the social ecological relationship producing wasted people and wasted places. Again, it's not that recycling is not enough, but the problem is that wasting relationships, they extract values, contaminating, expropriating, or even killing the life. Now, if you think about necropolitics, for instance, no, uh, commoning is the real answer to the wasting relationship, because commoning, what they do, they reproduce resources through inclusion, through the sharing rather than appropriation. And they are radically different, because commoning is not building an othering process, but is always building an us, which is not a naturalized us. The us that we are interested here is the us dancing around the toxic fire. It's the us which can bring together workers, women, indigenous people, like it happened at Standing Rock in North Dakota when the Black Lives Matter activists arrived to fight together with the veterans and the Native Americans to stop the pipeline. And I also stop here. Thank you for your patience. I was a little bit longer than I would like to.
Thank you so much, Marco. And also, I really, and I think that I am also speaking on behalf of Molly and of Timo Maran, who is not here with us today, as serious editors. Molly as the founding editor, and Timo and I as co-editors of the Elements, Cambridge University Elements series, that actually is considering your manuscript, your invited manuscript on Waste-to-Scene, which is, as you very eloquently explained, these are hypotheses which complements the Anthropocene, because of course you are not assuming that we should change the name to the west, to the Anthropocene, and you are not arguing for this geological epoch that should just be yet another scene in the series of all these proposals or geological hypotheses and etc. But you are clearly saying that we cannot make the case for a geological epoch if we don't consider the relationships that produce this epoch. And these are relationships based on the, as you say, the othering of anything else which doesn't really falls into the logic of capitalism and the toxic narratives of capitalism. And it's very important that in the Waste-to-Scene, as you put it, we humans had become testimonies to these relationships. So you were saying that of course every toxicity narrative has so many characters, so as human characters but also non-human characters, and of course in the light of transcorporeality and of course ecology. We don't need a transcorporeality. Rachel Carson was very was very clear about that. So we cannot really create a boundary between what is human and what is not non-human, and a body which is affected from toxicity and a body which is not affected from toxicity. So toxicity is something which is pervading everything which is alive, and therefore we cannot create boundaries. But it's very important that if the Anthropocene makes the so-called anthropos as a geological subject, then the Waste-to-Scene explores this subjectivity as yet so a variation on the theme of subalternity. So geological subjects, so people and living beings which are subject to certain relationship, and therefore they are themselves geological sediments because if you read the body of someone living in this favela, you will have a geological sample of certain relationships of power. And this is, we need a category like Waste-to-Scene or Capitalocene, but Waste-to-Scene, it's more extreme, more radical than Capitalocene, because Capitalocene is too circumscribed. Waste-to-Scene is really goes to the roots of these othering relationships. And therefore it's a very useful heuristic descriptor for this kind of relationships. Therefore, Molly and her serious co-editors are sort of excited about this manuscript. So we might tell. I want to, well, as usual, I was just creating the buffering zone between your intervention and debate. So everybody is, so you can reply to what I said, or we can welcome more questions. Very welcome.
Thank you, Serenella. Thanks. And yes, I mean, thank you. Always, actually, you understand something that I said that I am not sure that I understand in the first place. But anyway, what I want to say is that something that I truly believe is that I don't think that I have made up, something very original. I know that you should not say this in academia, right? Because we need to sell ourselves. We need to say that we are the most intelligent, smart, and whatever. I don't think that I invented anything very original. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't write anything like that without, the Capitalocene that you mentioned, the work of Jason Moore, Andreas Malm. I couldn't say anything about this without the work of so many indigenous scholars who have been thinking about the Black Anthropocene, about, the apocalypse that is in the past and not in the future. I couldn't say anything without the Plantationocene that Donna Haraway and Anna Tsing has said, and so on and so forth. So I know, I mean, I should actually campaign and say that mine is so new and please buy my idea. But actually, I would like to start practicing this idea of commoning and not appropriating in the place where I am, and I am now here in this class with you. And my way of living the commoning is telling you that it's not new. Many scholars before me have said this, and I am very glad to be so lucky to have learned from them, including Serenella, to tell you the truth, because I am very in depth about for instance, many of these reflection about the body is also coming from eco-criticism in Italy, and especially, the things that you have been, well, also some previous article, I guess, with about Naples and waste and the porosity of the city and of the body. So yes, I will perish in the publish or perish winter of our academia, but sometimes it's better to perish rather than dying of neoliberal academia. So yes, it's not new.
Yeah, I don't think that you run this risk of.
Ah, you never know. In Sweden, everything is possible. No, Swedish is connected, right? Yes. Okay. In Sweden, everything is possible.
Well,
I
reaction.
have I had also questions from you. I mean, I am very happy to start replying from them, but partially I think that something I said can be a little bit an answer as much as I can, but I am also very happy to go through your questions and try to say something as you prefer.
Who wants to start? Let me let me pick Angel. Angel.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And my question was, it was actually about the article that you wrote about your experience with COVID. So I was basically asking, you had 4 lessons. So I was asking, are these 4 lessons going to be essential in the future work that you do?
Thank you, Angel. Well, I have here, yes, can you hear me, right? I have here two answers. One is the right answer, and another one is the true answer. So let's start with the truth that I think it's better. The truth is that I thought that I think, and I thought that the last lesson was the most important for me. I mean, of course, you are not interested in my personal life. Why should you? But I have been very focused on my work for so long. I felt very lonely in this country where I live now. And basically for 7 years, I have been just writing and working. And I realized when I was dying, at a certain point, I was thinking, oh my God, I am dying. And, uh, everything I thought was so important, the publications and, my article, which has been just rejected in the peer review because, even senior scholar gets rejected, and at least me, and and so on and so forth. It was not, everything was not so relevant. I was just very afraid. Yes, so this was my most important for me. However, then life arrives back, right? The life strikes back, and so I am now back to my usual mode a little bit, struggling with the fact that I was really looking for something different, and I am not so much able to do it. I am stuck in my life, and I would like to do something about this. But this is very personal. Probably is not what you wanted to listen. So if you want to listen something more academic, I can tell you that one thing that I believe it's relevant is this idea about how much the space from where we talk is relevant. No, I mean I am Italian. I arrived in the hospital, and as soon as I arrived, all the doctors, nurses, they were sure that I got the COVID-19 in Italy, because Italy was, you know, at the verge. Italy was like the black sheep in Europe. And actually, I didn't. I mean, I was living in Sweden, and I was not back in Italy since, I don't know, a year maybe. So I got the virus actually here in Sweden. But what was interesting for me was this idea that in the Western world, we don't think of our body in a very, close relationship with the environment around. We don't track our, our daily life. We assume that our body is completely sealed and it's relevant where we pass through, where we live. So I think that this is, it's curious for me. And I think that it's also telling something about our relationship with with different environments. I think, and how much we are. We are both a cultural construction. I am Italian, right? My accent is pretty sure I am Italian, right? I mean, more or less Italian, yeah, from Naples, so more or less Italian. Still, this cultural construction and actually the ecology of a country hit very badly by COVID is crashing, merging in an hospital in Sweden. And I think this is something, as an environmental historian, I am curious of.
Let me also add that while you were hospitalized, so as your close friend, and of course as part of the circle of colleagues that work with you on a regular basis, and so from the outside, I'm talking for myself, and your family was also able to experience how dense this network of commoning is around your persona, because this is also very important at what we do. Sometimes the academe is a field ridden with rivalries and of course missed comprehensions, voluntary incomprehensions, and so forth, and so on. So ambiguities. But if there is something that was emerging with clarity, was the fact that people that were aware that you were not well were with you, and so a community of also of emotions, of feelings, of affection, just reunited around your persona while you were in the ICU. And this is also telling element about how you conceive of your work. It's not only a theory, the commoning idea. It's also something which goes beyond.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun, not so much to be in a coma, but it was fun to receive all the videos after that, because I got a video of a former student of us from Brazil, and they made actually a ritual with the shaman in the Amazon for my heal. We got a bunch of Ethiopian students praying for me in Ethiopia. We got, of course, my comrades from Naples doing whatever they think was appropriate for my rescue, but especially sending me this amazing video telling me that if I didn't get well, they would come actually and kick my ass, I think was the expression, the sophisticated message in that video. And yes, and of course there were a lot of people trying to be close to us and to me in different ways. But I really liked the variety, and I was very grateful. I mean, also something that I also learned to be a little bit humble and not, too judgmental. And you you pray, you send a video, you send a poem, and you find your own way. And I am grateful because you are different, not because you are the same.
Yes, we sometimes tend to forget that we are human beings. So
Yeah, yeah,
there are other
yes,
layers, not only the scholarly
yeah.
prosopopea and so on. Well,
I
more
say one little thing.
sure.
I think all of our work should be closely involved with our personal lives. I have always thought that. And I think it's wonderful the way you work, Marco, the way your element reads because of that and what you've said today,
Thank
because
you,
it brings it all together,
thank
all
you,
together. Yeah.
thank you so much. I mean, it's hard because
Yeah.
it's not always easy. For instance, when I wrote, I mean, they asked me to write something on COVID-19 because I am the president of the European Society for Environmental History, and I got sick. And actually, a friend of mine, Marcus Hall, my co-editor, he said, you are obsessed with field work, so you needed to do field work in in the ICU. So now you need to write. But in a way, they were also a little bit surprised by the kind of piece that I wrote. Because I think that they wanted me to write something, a bit more historical about pandemic and so on and so forth. Which, by the way, it's very relevant. It's just I didn't have, I think I am not good enough to do so. I mean, I needed to ground my scholarship where I am. And yes, so I did something very, I think, very personal. And for somebody can be challenging, I guess.
But with your
But
concept of ways to see, you have found the perfect concept to just to do an archaeology of the present.
yeah,
Involves yourself and everybody, because you can really read.
It's your body.
It's your body, but it's
yeah.
also considered archaeologically because these
Yeah.
relationships are old, so age old. They are not starting today or in January. I mean,
But I think there is also something, I mean, I don't know to phrase this in a good way, but I think there is something actually wrong in this separation. And I think what is wrong is that, first of all, there is an idea of the body as something personal, or your life something personal. And this is a lie. This is the neoliberal lie. It's a lie saying that you are a failure, because you are not a failure. There is a system producing failures. It's a lie saying that you are poor because you didn't succeed. It's a lie to telling you that you are not strong enough. It's a lie telling you that you do not belong. You don't belong. So I think there is even I would say, an epistemic mistake, error here, this separation, because there is no separation. And I mean, Sandra Harding, she's a feminist science scholar. She said once that the best knowledge production is the one that is starting from something that she called strong objectivity. And the strong objectivity is not pretending that you are disembodied, that you do not stand where you are. It's the other way around. And this is not, this is a fact. Uh, the better medical science was produced by scientists who were standing with the workers, because those people understood the asbestos disease. Those people understood silicosis in the mines. So it's the other way around. It's not that if you are not biased, you produce better knowledge. It's the other way around. It's that when you stand where you are, when you take a position, you are producing something that Sandra Harding called strong objectivity. And yes, This is what I think.
It's what Merleau-Ponty says in the phenomenology of perception.
Yes.
See,
And,
how many voices
yeah.
that speak to the responsibility of so because this also makes you as a scholar accountable, more accountable, because the objectivity is also sometimes a sort of a you see it's something, a hide that you put on yourself, is something just like una tenda, how do you say, a curtain.
A curtain. It's a
A curtain that
smoke
covers you,
screen.
but if you say something from your situatedness, this makes you accountable for what you say. It's not a bias, it's also the responsibility to say something. But more questions for our Marco. Valentina, you had something, I know.
It's so difficult not to have questions at this point. Yes, I was interested in the guerrilla narratives. I would like to know if you have a final objective to reach, and if you hope to expand globally with the collection, and if you think that expanding globally would be the point where we would see the change we hope. What do you think?
And before you answer, Marco, also Christian had a question on guerrilla narrative. So
Yes.
perhaps we can hear also.
Sure, better. Yeah, please.
Sorry, I just wanted to get my mic. So my question, I think, was more of like how guerrilla narrative, or the way that it's presented to the public. I know it's kind of compiled on this really awesome website. How does it combat the kind of general perception of these stories as invalid? Because I think in a lot of societies, people are kind of taught that, you know, it's the experts and the scientists that we need to listen to, and that kind of plays into the toxic narratives that you defined. And so how are you framing these stories, or how do they combat that kind of prejudice, I guess, in terms of what counts as legitimate?
Thank you, and I will try to be short because I'm talking too much. I think it's an Italian disease. So the aim of guerrilla narrative, well, I think that the idea was precisely to, as I said, we thought that there is these toxic narratives, silencing, erasing, normalizing social and environmental injustice. So let's try to uncover these hidden stories of contamination. And in doing so, we also realized that actually there was a resisting story that was also emerging. We said that our toxic bios archive was a little bit like the Environmental Humanities, how can I say, well, version or partner of the EJ Atlas, the Environmental Justice Atlas, which, by the way, is an amazing project. But we wanted to put into that project also, not the project per se, but let's say the scientific project of, you know, thinking about environmental justice around the world, the issue of narrative of storytelling. Yes, we would like to go global, and we tried. We had also a hub in Brazil, as a matter of fact, in Bahia. I can tell you a very short story. Toxic Bios is a very funny project. Well, also tragic, actually, but anyway, it's a funny project. Why? Because it's the cheapest project we have ever done. So, you know, we got more or less $40,000, a bit less. Just to give you an idea, with another project, Clisel, we got more or less a bit more than $300,000. And with the Enhance project, we got $1 million and something, right? So this is, you know, however, the Toxic Bios project is probably my most successful project. I mean, I am joking because it's very difficult to say what is a success, but I can tell you that like a couple of weeks ago, somebody called me from Goldsmith College in London, asking me if I want to be part of their new center of excellence because they were inspired by the toxic bios project. Or, you know, I am invited in many places around the world. I mean, in Bahia, in Brazil, in Oslo, in here, in North Carolina, to talk about this project. If I make a comparison, I will say it's a very successful project with a very small investment. But I am saying this also because, you know, just to give you an idea, I think that the Environmental Justice Atlas got, I'm not sure, but maybe 5 million over the years, of course. And it's an amazing project. It's like more than 3,000 entries. So it's very well done. It's a very, but anyway, yes, we would like to go global, but we don't have the money. And actually, we tried one path that didn't work out. Our idea was try to have a bottom-up approach. So you can record your own story and send to us. Didn't work. We got, I might be wrong, out of 70, I don't know, maximum 5. The other one were collected, co-produced with some kind of a researcher involved. A researcher can be also another activist, right? Doesn't mean an academic person. So at this point, I mean, I tried to get more money for the Toxic Bios project. I couldn't. So Roberta has been helping me a lot to try to at least, how can I say, fill the platform with everything we had co-produced, but I don't know if we'll manage. It's a difficult project because one question you had, you know, the aim, when, you know, a panel of experts will ask me this question, I am always, you know, struggling because, you know, the aim is also doing political work and it's very hard to get funded to do this kind of work. So I'm not so sure. And I think that maybe it was you were also asking me if I think that this can change the world, can contribute in changing the world. Now, I don't know how to say this, but you know, I think that in this respect, I I don't know what you think, but Valentina, right? But I would be a little bit more humble myself. I thought, I mean, I have met so many academics who think that they are changing the world with the last book that they published. And you know what? They are just changing their career. The truth is that the world will be changed by the Zapatistas in Chiapas, by the indigenous people in North Dakota, by, you know, the Black Lives Matter, by, you know, the people fighting in Naples against toxicity. If I can be part of this story, I would be grateful. They would be very patient to have somebody like me on board. I get sick easily. And generally I'm very scared of being beaten up by the police. So I'm not the best, you know, partner in this kind of struggle. If they want me to be part of their struggle, I am very happy. But I am a bit more, maybe I'm pessimistic. I don't know. I do believe that stories can change the world, but the stories are out there, are not in my book. So they don't need to be collected in my toxic bios project. Those toxic biographies are out there, are in Cancer Alley, are in Houston, Texas, are in Taranto, in Italy, and those stories will change the world, but they don't need me. I don't think they need me. And Kristen, your question was about, well, you were asking about I don't know if I understood very well your question, but for me, you were also raising the issue about fake news in a sense. No, I mean, in this time in which science has been questioned and, you know, there is the so-called post-truth world, what we can do with the project like toxic bios, with a methodology like guerrilla narrative. This is crucial for me. I agree with you. It's a very complicated issue. I don't want to be enrolled I don't want to sign up in the army of the anti-science, you know, the anti-science army, right? However, and this is very tricky, I still want to be critical of science because I believe that being critical of science is actually helping to have better science. I mean, sometimes people ask me, do you believe in science? And it's so weird because I thought that religion, gods, sometimes ideology. Can be something that you believe in, but not science. Science isn't made by, you know, experiments, and what is true now might become not true in a few years, and so on and so forth, isn't it? So this is not relativism. I am not saying, so yes, you know, we might discover that the planet is actually flat. It's going to be very hard. I mean, never know, but I don't think so. And I think that you need a mask actually to fight COVID-19. And I believe that climate change is real. However, when we say that climate change is real, we do not say anything about what is causing climate change and how we address climate change, because this is the space for politics. And you know, you can have another nuclear atomic plant to tackle climate change. You can have the securitization of the energy production. You can have small scale energy production. You can have degrowth. All these things can work. It's a political choice, while it's a scientific truth saying that climate change is anthropogenic, so it's caused by human on Earth. I don't know, maybe I did answer your question, but maybe your question was good for me because it was a way for me to reflect about this. And you know, Christine, I actually think that your question is very crucial. And it's something that we should ask ourselves. And I mean, I told you, I am really struggling. At a certain point, a newspaper here in Sweden invited me to contribute with a piece about, you know, post-truth. And when I try to make a point about, you know, criticizing science, things become very, very weird. And so it's a very small, it's a very narrow corridor, and we need to decide if we should completely close the corridor, because the point is that we believe in science, or do we want to do something about this? And maybe later on I can tell you a story about Brazil, but I am talking too much, so I will stop here.
Well, we can have a couple of more questions, and then Marco, I think it's time for you to get back to your non-working life. So
No, please, I am
so
here.
I was gonna ask. I know that Federico told me Stefano, and then I know that there is a question from Federico Luisetti also. And if there are short questions, we can have more questions. I know that there was just said Daniele had a fantastic question that would require an entire lecture. But what we cannot address, let me tell you, what we are not able to address today, we will talk about these issues next time, and because they are very relevant. And thank you so much, because look at what I'm reading now, rereading now, thanks to Daniele.
Yeah.
I take all these questions very seriously.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So
And by the way, just to close the circle here, my book, The Arachnation, was translated into Italian because Wu Ming discovered the book. They did an interview with me in JAP,
yeah.
their news, kind of blog, and then they presented the book to an Audi, which decided to translate it.
So for those who don't know, Wu Ming is a collective of writers, which is one of the most influential and also original author of unidentified narrative objects.
And today there is an interview with Wu Ming about the silence of Italian writers about climate change. There's just today an interview, if I'm not mistaken, in Il Fatto Quotidiano, which is in Italian. Nice. I am not completely sure about the newspaper. I think it's on. Yes.
Yeah. So go to the website JAP, GIAP. Well, anyway, we will talk about it next time. But very shortly, so Stefano, you wanted to add something. So if we can keep these questions rather short so that we can have time.
Yeah, I will do that. Thanks many, Professor Miero, for your presentation. Brilliant and mind-blowing. I see that the idea of archive is getting more and more popular under different perspectives. Well, we have Hubert Zapf, for example, focusing on the idea of rereading the archive of Western culture under new perspectives, and you instead focus on the idea of creating new archives, right? And I've got a provocation, perhaps, which is, isn't there the risk of perpetuating certain ways of telling stories if we keep on collect stories about experience with the environment, which are still maybe constructed on those ideas and problematic ideas, and for example connected to certain perception of the natural world as counter term of the human, which is implicit in the way we narrate stories, and I say we as human beings. And so instead of a guerrilla of narratives, we are in fact in need of a guerrilla of critical perspectives to apply on literary texts.
Should I answer, Serenella? Should I start answering, or yes? Well, thank you, Stefano. It's a good, of course, it's a good provocation. And well, the risk of reproducing the dichotomy, the binary opposition with the natural world and humans, it's true. You might even say, for instance, a declensionist narrative. Sometimes in our toxic stories, in our archives, the archive, there was, once upon a time, this town was, in perfect harmony with the environment. I had a similar problem actually a few years ago, if I'm not mistaken, in 2014. I tried to experiment with the first time with guerrilla narrative, and I published a collection of autobiographies of women, including Serenella, actually, who did actually the post. How do you say the post? The afterword, thank you, the afterword of the book. The book was entitled Teresa and le altre, Teresa and the others. And it was a precise. So in one case, at least in one case, Teresa, the main character of the book, she was really proposing something extremely problematic in a sense, because she was telling the story about the neighborhood where she grew up, which was once upon a time basically a rural area very close to the city, to Naples, and then it was basically became part of the city with becoming a working class, even I would say underclass, maybe at a certain point. But she's telling a story about this fantastic past in which they were happy and so on and so forth. But that past was also a very patriarchal past. In her description, there is this idea of the pater familia, the grandfather. Everybody was around him and so on and so forth. And I was very uncomfortable about this. So what should I do with this? I published it because those stories are not mine. Those are stories of the people gathering and thinking about their experience. My role was, as a scholar, I am interested in this reinvention of the past, and it's precisely as you said. So the production of an archive, it's the difference between an antiquario and somebody collecting antiquities and an historian is that the historian is interpreting the past. It's not just putting a price, a label on the things. So it's up to the people working in the archive always to interpret it. The story that Teresa tells in Teresa e le altre in my book is a problematic story, and somebody needs to say that. And by the way, this problem is inside the movement. At a certain point, we had a meeting, many of us, and actually there was a fight basically between the so-called madri vulcaniche, so the volcanic mothers. It's a name of a grassroots organization around the Vesuvius. The Vesuvius is the mountain close to Naples, the volcanic mothers, and another group of women. And they were saying, you are proposing a very naturalized vision of uh, of women, you know, the idea that to be a woman you must be a mother and so on. So there was, I mean, the discussion is there. However, it's not up to me to set the, you know, the political agenda in the movement. I mean, I was there and I was witnessing the clash. It was actually an harsh clash, and it was the same with Teresa and other women in my book. And I am happy about this contradiction because I, you know, as a scholar, I believe that actually the contradictions are the most important part in our research, because dialectically is actually putting something forward rather than, you know, something without. So yes, I mean, I too much talk on my side. I think it's a good question. Probably I don't have a good answer. I am just bubbling something, but just to say that I see your point, and maybe the answer is that in producing an archive, what we should never confuse. We should never confuse an archive with the history as it was. An archive is always an organization of the memory as we remember the facts. And then it's up to the scholars to interpret the archive anyway. And, you know, I would say that any archive is always a colonial project. It's always a colonial project. And I am aware of this. Maybe, you know, when the best strategy to deal with this is to be aware of your limitation rather than to pretend that there are no limits. So you point out very important limits, and I think it's good that you keep this in mind always.
Yes.
And I try to do the same.
And I mean, I think that you answered many questions with this answer, but I simply want to give, I know that Federico Luisetti has an important question for you, as a question for you. That's, this will be our last question. What can I say? It's such an interesting debate. We can go on forever, but we are aware that Sweden is late.
But I can be with you for a little while. I mean, there's no problem. If there's anything else that we want to discuss, I am happy to. Yes.
Federico.
So Marco, yes, I have a question related to waste and your Waste to Scene project. So I look forward to reading it. I think it's very important. It's actually fundamental. I've been thinking a little bit about waste, and something that struck me is that in our current global economy of misery and slums, millions of people are actually living on waste as waste pickers. So I learned this from the Environmental Justice Atlas that documents so many environmental conflicts in which actually waste people are kicked off their fundamental work as recyclers in a way, even if it's extremely toxic work, and they are deprived of their livelihood, which is a toxic livelihood, but that is their environment, and they're deprived by that, by the circular economy, capital intensive, energy, waste to energy capitalists that for which the waste pickers are useless. So it's a paradox, it's a tragic paradox, right? Millions of people living on waste and eco-modernizing, forcing them into even more misery by not allowing them to lead their toxic lives. So I wonder if this is a theme also of your Waste to Scene project, or what do you think about this paradox?
Thank you, Federico. I shared a paper right now in the chat. The author, this Medina guy, he is a very well-known scholar working precisely on what you are just mentioning. Actually, there's a book that he wrote, I think it's called like Waste Pickers of the World, something like that, which is extremely important. And yes, so I think that you are raising the question about yes, in my book there is something. In the second chapter and in the last chapter, in the second chapter I mentioned the case of Ghana. Ghana actually is also part of the EJ Atlas. I am not sure how to pronounce the name of this landfill, but it's a big, I think it's the largest electronic waste landfill in the world. And in the last chapter, I mentioned the Giardino de Camargo, which is a very famous landfill in Rio, very famous especially because Vic Muniz, the very famous artist, did a project which became then a documentary, Wasteland, if I'm not mistaken, the title of the video. I think that here the problem is, well, I'm just thinking with you, Federico, because I think it's a good, it's a very important question. But maybe one way to address this issue is thinking about the, you know, in Marxian terms of reification. If the problem is again waste or even toxicity per se, we are solving the problem. So we are creating sanitary landfills. We are kicking people out with speakers from these. We are avoiding the intoxication, the contamination of this. We are solving the problem. On the other hand, as I said, the Westosian logic does not clash with the idea of putting waste and of transforming waste into value, or we could say of extracting value from waste. It's actually perfectly fine in the Westosian logic. So I think that here the problem is again to look beyond the reification and thinking about the socio-ecological relationships creating that kind of outputs. Because I mean, in my Dina work is actually making a point that many, many people are, you know, in many places people are getting a better life out of waste. I mean, in comparison, I mean, to enter in the cooperative in the Giardino Camargo is actually difficult. It's a selection. And because it's a better job than many other jobs in Rio. The problem here is not that, you know, the opposite of the Westosian is no waste. So we should not have waste speakers. The problem is that in the case of Brazil, for instance, there is a fantastic article about, and even in the book I try to say something about this, not sure that it's so fantastic, but I try to make a point that is the making of an identity. There is a scholar talking about an ontological insurgency in waste speakers around the world. So the problem is transforming an identity in a job. So you are not a wasted person. You are a waste speaker. You are working into the recycling sector, but you are not a wasted person. And to do that, you need a change in the wasting relationship, or as this scholar that I don't remember the name now, she's from South Africa. I can look up if you wish and put in, but it's in the book, in the manuscript. She's talking about this ontological insurgency. If I am not mistaken, in Durban, right? In Durban, when there was a climate summit, there was a huge demonstration by waste speakers, and they were making the point that they were contributing in cooling down the climate of the planet. So the point is not having a world without waste and waste speakers, because, you know, yeah, I mean, I think that zero waste is a project. I don't think that it's something that we can realize. I mean, you need to aim at zero waste, because if you aim at zero waste, you will get something good. It's a little bit like socialism, right? I mean, it's not that you will get socialism, because last time that we got it, it was really bad. We ended up in Siberia. But if you aim at something, you might get a good welfare state. Isn't it funny that, for instance, people would say in the US that Norway is a socialist country because everybody has health care, right? I mean, tell the Norwegian that they are socialists. They will, you know, be very offended, and so on and so forth. So yes, we need to aim at zero waste, because in this way we actually get, it's like recycling. Recycling is important, especially because it connects you to the outputs, your footprints of your life. It's not, I don't think that, you know, you really will, I don't know, I mean, don't, please don't be offended, but I don't think that you will really change the world by recycling, but it will help you to understand that your consumption is not, you know, in the cloud, that you do not live in a dematerialized society. It's not true. The fact that we are connecting through this, you know, connection here doesn't mean that we are in a post materialistic society. Just we have transferred, you know, our pollution to somebody else in another place, and probably there was some kids mining for our IT support here in Congo or in some other places. It's a little bit like the electric car. Sometimes we think that electric cars are magic car. They are not magic. They are electric. Are electric cars better than you know, fossil fuel car? Yes, they are. Are they challenging the waste scene? No, because to challenge the waste scene, you need actually revolution. You don't need, you know, uh, what is the name of the company, of the car company? I cannot remember. Tesla. Thank you, Tesla. You don't need Tesla. Yes. But Federico, I know I am not answering very well, but I think that you are pointing out to this contradiction, right? But I think that my project is not a clean world without waste. I don't know if I can say what is my project, maybe not, because Serenella really needs a job in North Carolina. So let's say that I have another project.
So thank you
Thank you, Mark.
with this fantastic ending. So we can be rest reassured that our job is secure for at least the moment until you publish your waste book. So,
at least it's not my fault. So let's put it this way.
So we really appreciate your generosity, Marco. We know that this is energy going on, and so we are extremely grateful. And so for those of you who want to join our group, next week we have Federico Luisetti, who just gave us a little taste of what we will be talking about next week. And of course, once you're a guest, you're always guest. So just keep this in mind. You're part of the community, right? So thank you, everybody, and I'll see you in a week. Bye bye.
Let me thank everybody really, and I hope to have a chance to. And you know, please feel free to email me if there is something that you want to ask, or if you think that I might be of any, you know, help or whatever. I will write down my email right.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you, everybody.